Welcome to this deep dive. If you've ever felt just completely overwhelmed, like the pressures of life are literally rising up over your head and you're frantically searching for some solid ground but just can't find it anywhere, well, you are absolutely in the right place today. We're going to unpack one of the most raw, brutally honest, and honestly profound pieces of ancient literature ever written, Psalm 69. We're calling this exploration the Cry of the Deep Waters, and our goal today is to take a highly structured look at this text, decode its emotional and prophetic depth, and figure out exactly how it acts as a survival blueprint for navigating our own modern crises. So let's just drop straight into the heavy reality of this. Listen to this visceral cry from David. "Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in the miry depths. I have come into the deep waters." We're bypassing the pleasantries here and plunging right into the reality of emotional exhaustion. He's not just having a bad day, right? He is experiencing profound desperation, a literal feeling of drowning, where the crisis has seeped into his very soul. Because we are starting in such deep, dark waters, we need a roadmap. So here's our structured path for today. First, the cry of the waters. Second, hatred, shame, and poison. Third, the song in the trial. Fourth, the Psalm of Jesus. And finally, applications for today. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The Cry of the Waters.
Okay, let's really look at the suffocating weight of this emotional drowning. The specific metaphor David uses here is the deep mire, basically deep, thick mud. Think about the physics of that for a second. It's a place with absolutely zero firm ground. When you're stuck in deep mud, your natural instinct is to thrash around, to fight, to work harder to pull yourself out. But in a mire, the harder you struggle, the faster you sink. I know a lot of you watching can validate this with your own experiences of burnout. You try harder, you put in longer hours to fix whatever crisis you're in, but you just end up feeling more and more stuck. David's exhaustion here is spiritual just as much as it is physical. He says his throat is dry from crying out, his eyes are failing, and honestly, it validates our human exhaustion. Sometimes our human frame simply gives out, and our secret, quiet place just becomes a place of tears. Now, you might be wondering, why dedicate an entire deep dive to this one particular cry of pain? Well, here is a fascinating fact. Psalm 69 is the second most quoted psalm in the entire New Testament, sitting just behind Psalm 22. That tells us something absolutely crucial. This isn't just an isolated diary entry of the king having a breakdown. No way. This is a text with massive prophetic weight. It's foundational theology that New Testament writers reached for time and time again to explain the entire cosmic plan of redemption. Which brings us to part 2, hatred, shame, and poison. Moving deeper into the descent, we transition from David's internal drowning to the devastating external attacks he was facing. The water rising to his neck wasn't just a metaphor for sadness. It was a metaphor for very real, very vicious enemies. He exposes the root of this pain. First, he's being pursued and slandered unjustly. He is hated without cause by a multitude of people. But then, the pain gets sharper, much closer to home. He's treated as a complete stranger by his own brothers. He is an outcast in his own family. And why? Well, the key lies in his zeal for God's house. David's fierce devotion actually caused his isolation. His love for God's presence and for justice agitated the people around him who were perfectly happy living in the mud of their own sin. So his pain was uniquely tied to his faithfulness. And this perfectly illustrates the rock bottom of our narrative. Consider what happens when you expect human support during the deepest part of a trial, only to get hit with a harsh reality. David looked around for comfort. He expected a bit of pity, just a shoulder to lean on from his allies. But instead, absolute abandonment. Actually, worse than abandonment. His opponents actively increased his pain. He poetically describes this as being given gall for food and vinegar for thirst. It is literally the peak of human cruelty. Seeking a lifeline and being handed poison when you are already drowning. Part 3. The song in the trial. So here is the crucial pivot point. While he's still surrounded by deep waters with absolutely no firm ground in sight and his throat completely dry, David executes a massive pivot. He stops looking horizontally at his betrayers, he takes decisive leadership over his own emotions, and he makes this incredible declaration: "I will praise God's name in song. This will please the Lord more than an ox, more than a bull with its horns and hooves."
This is a revolutionary theological statement for that time. In an era when the ultimate expression of devotion was a massive, expensive animal sacrifice at the altar, David says no. A song of gratitude rising out of a broken, grieving heart moves heaven far more than the most expensive religious sacrifice money could buy. Praise in the middle of the desert, praise while you are still stuck in the mire, that is what truly captures the heart of God.
Moving to part 4, the Psalm of Jesus. Let's look at how this builds a precise prophetic bridge. Remember when we said this is the second most quoted psalm in the New Testament? The early authors realized that David's specific, localized suffering was an exact blueprint for the passion of Jesus Christ. And this connection is surgical in its precision. Look at this. When David said he was hated without cause, Jesus fulfilled this exactly in John 15 to explain the religious leaders' persecution of him. When David said zeal for the house of God devoured him, the disciples witnessed Jesus clearing the temple and immediately remembered that exact verse. David spoke poetically of being given gall and vinegar. At the crucifixion, this became literal. The soldiers offered Jesus vinegar mixed with gall. And finally, David's isolation from his brothers perfectly mirrored how Jesus' own brothers initially didn't believe in him. On the cross, Jesus faced the ultimate isolation and abandonment. He took all of that on himself so that we would never have to be without a comforter. Christ perfectly filled the mold of David's agony.
Finally, part 5, applications for today.
Now, shifting the focus directly to you. How do we take this ancient, profound theology and actually use it to survive the pressure cooker of our modern lives? Well, here are 3 highly actionable steps for your week. Step 1, deliver your mud to the altar. If you are facing operational problems, financial pressures, or relationship conflicts that are rising up to your neck, stop thrashing. Trading despair for surrender means getting on your knees and saying, I have no firm ground, so I am placing my feet on the rock of Christ. I hand this mud over to you. Just rest in his sovereignty. Step 2, choose the song of trial. When the crisis hits, resist that natural urge to complain, murmur, or isolate in bitterness. Instead, intentionally put on a worship song focused on God's faithfulness. Force your mind to give thanks for who God is. Praise in the pain literally breaks spiritual chains. And step 3, don't expect from humans the comfort that only comes from Christ. David was crushed when his friends gave him vinegar. A lot of times we enter a crisis expecting our market, our partners, our friends, or a family to perfectly understand our heavy burden. But they will inevitably fall short. When people fail you, look at Jesus on the cross. He knows what it is to be misunderstood and abandoned. Seek your validation entirely in him.
As we wrap up this exploration, let's leave off with one simple but very provocative question. Where are you looking for comfort in your deep waters? Seriously, when the waters rise to your neck, are you thrashing around in the mud of your own effort? Are you looking to flawed humans who might just hand you vinegar? Or are you looking to the ultimate source of rescue, the one who stepped into the deepest waters of isolation so that you wouldn't have to drown? Think about that as you go into your week. Keep learning, keep seeking, and I'll catch you on the next one.